Hi everybody, join me to knit the Anya hat. This is a free pattern download from Debbie Bliss and it's super fast. Let's get started. The first thing that I've done here is to cast on 52 stitches. I've got here a 40 centimetre circular needle with 8mm needles on, and so the stitches are on the cables here. And the first thing we're going to do is to join the knitting, so we're knitting in the round. Now, when you're knitting a hat or something small like this in the round, it's very much easier if you have a smaller, shorter needle. You can use a 40 centimetre or a 60 centimetre for this hat. If you've only got longer cables, you can use magic loop. And we can talk about that another day. But let me show you how we join up. So we've got all your stitches. First of all, just check that all the stitches are not twisted. Nothing's twisted. It's all sitting with the cast on edge sitting towards the front here. When you lie them down, I'm just going to push the stitches around the cable so that we've got them sitting here nicely, ready to join up. So you've got the side with the working yarn attached to the ball on the right, and we're going to knit into this stitch here on the left. So keep your little tail out of the way and then pop your needle into the first stitch on the left hand needle. So they're not joined at the moment, but now we're just going to pop that in. Now when you join this first stitch, you're going to use the working yarn which is attached to the ball, and just make sure you keep this quite close contact. I'm not saying hold it tight, but just keep it sort of quite close so that you don't get too much of a gap. We can sort out a gap if you get one, but that's just my advice there. So we just take the knitting round, yarn around, go under and off, and that first stitch has joined the round. I'm just going to knit a few more stitches, round we go. Now when you knit in the round, we call each all the way around and back to the beginning again, a round rather than a row. And this tail, which is the beginning of your round, you can often see beginning of the round listed as BOR, beginning of round, in a pattern. I'm going to put a little marker there just to remind me that that is indeed the beginning of the round. You don't have to do that, but sometimes it's quite nice, especially if you're following a more complicated pattern than this one, to know where the beginning is. So we carry on knitting round, and you'll see that, oh, split that. You'll see that the stitches will get quite bunched up. So in exactly the same way as you would do for your straight needles, just move the stitches round, and the more you knit round, you need to just shifty the stitches around the needles to get them nice and tidy. This is one ball of Merion yarn by Debbie Bliss. It is a chunky weight roving yarn. It's absolutely gorgeously soft. It'll keep your head really nice and warm. And as I think we said on the blurb, it's a free pattern download called the Anya hat. So I'm just coming around here. This shade is gold, but there are some lovely colours in the range, and they all match each other really beautifully, which is very nice. So as I'm coming around here, now I'm just knitting as normal. I'm going to get around the 52 stitches back to the beginning of the round. You can see I'm going to move the stitches round here, just shifty them around. Just behave with it as if it was on straight needles. It's exactly the same process. It just so happens that you're going around in a circle. So here we're coming up now, and you will find probably that the first row, as with any kind of knitting project, quite often the first row is a little bit tight, but you'll notice that that will really open up a little bit as you come up to the second row. Here we go, coming up to the second row now, and I just want to show you here. So there is the beginning of the row where we put our marker. you can see the little stitches there where we started off, where we joined the round. So I'm just going to knit straight past that and show you how the join, there we go, here we are, coming past the join now. Little bit stiff in there because it's just the first couple of rows. Now you notice that that does look a slightly baggy. Once you just give that a little pull, it'll tighten up, and when we finish knitting this hat, this will create a rolled edge actually, so you won't see it at all, but we're going to sew this end in so that it can cover any gap there. So don't worry if you end up with a gap, because it won't make any difference at all in the end. So what we do here is we just carry on knitting until you get to about, I think it's about 5.5 inches. I'll check that. You can make your hat deeper than that if you want, for somebody, you know, say if you're knitting it for somebody who has a particularly marvellously big head, then you can make it a little bit bigger. And because this is such an easy hat pattern, honestly, I think Debbie knitted 12 of these when they first came out, and I've done about 5. So they are perfect TV knitting. So I'll just show you. You can see that lovely gold coming up, the stitches coming round, and we just carry on knitting round and round and round and round until we reach that golden 5.5 inches mark. So here we are, I'm just knitting round, and you can see how much this hat has grown. We're coming up to the 8-inch mark now. So I think I said 5 earlier. I was obviously having some sort of brain burp. It's 8 inches long is what we need this to be. And as I've been knitting, I've been moving my little marker up to the top. So just keep moving it so that you know where the beginning of your round is. So I'm just going to work my way round on this last round. And once we reach that marker, we're going to start decreasing the hat to give it a point at the top. This is a supersonic, really fast hat to knit because you're on these lovely big needles and you're just working, obviously no purling because you're working in the round. Just keep knitting, knitting, knitting. It's the sort of thing you can do while you're watching the telly. Coming round to that marker now. And you see how I'm just moving the stitches around as I get to when they get bunched up. So here we are, we're coming up to my beginning of round marker. So as I said before, if you're knitting this for someone who has a particularly big head, you can knit this longer, but we found that 8 inches is just about the most perfect length. Here we are. So I've knitted my way round to the marker that I put in that denotes the beginning of round, and there's the tail of the yarn at the bottom. Now for the decrease yarn, the 2 decrease rounds, it's so easy. We're just going to knit 2 together all the way round back to the beginning of the round, and then we'll do it again. So we're going to start off, knit 2 together. So there's the first 2 stitches. Slide your needle so that you've got both of those stitches together. See, there's 1, 2. I'm going to slide my needle under both, bring the yarn around and knit it like a normal stitch. And now you've knitted those 2 stitches together, and all the way around we knit 2 together, which reduces the circumference of the hat quite quickly. So here we go, round and round. Knit 2 together all the way around. So here we are, we're just coming up now to our last marker, to the beginning of the round here. And what we're going to do now is just to continue again working, knit 2 together all the way around again. So that's 2 rounds of knit 2 together, and you just keep knitting 2 together until you come back round to the start. So I'll see you there in just a minute. So I've done 2 rounds now of knit 2 together, which has shrunk the hat into the circumference at the top, and we're back to the beginning of the round. I'm going to take that off, that little stitch marker, we don't need him anymore. And now what we do, it's a very easy way to finish the hat, there's no casting off. Just take a length of yarn and snip it off, and then thread this piece of yarn onto a yarn needle. Just a nice big, a needle with a nice big eye tapestry needle there. And then what we do is push your stitches onto the left hand needle, and with this piece of yarn that's attached there, we're going to thread it onto the spare yarn. So I'm just lifting the stitches off the needle and pulling the yarn through. I'm just doing 2 at a time. You can do more if you're daring. So that's 1, 2. And as we come round the circumference of the hat, you'll see the stitches are just being lifted onto the yarn in order to cinch it in to pull the yarn together, so that they're off the needles now. And then if I pull this yarn, you can see there, it just pulls and cinches the top of the hat in to a point. So there is our hat. Now you obviously want to make this secure, and I think the best way to do that is from the inside. So I'm going to pop my needle inside the hat, turn the hat inside out. Here's my needle there, got a bit caught up, and pull it through, and then you can see the inside, all the pearl bumps inside. Just stitch backwards and forwards against around that cinching in through the stitches to make it really super secure. And you just need, you know, a few little stitches in there to hold it safe. And we're all going to be possibly stitching a bobble hat through here, a bobble through here as well, so that will make it extra secure. Snip off the end there. I'm turning it round the right way, and here's our hat. And then we've got the end to sew in here. So again, take your yarn needle, thread it through, and to sew in the end. And this is to remember at the end, well, at the very beginning we were worried that there might be a bit of a gap here. If you do have a gap, there's a little bit of a gappy stitch there. This will actually sort that out. Just run your needle along as you sew the end in, and that goes over the top of any kind of little gap that you might have had. So just weave it through in one direction, and then turn it round and weave it back again through a few stitches the other way, and that keeps your end beautifully secure, so it's not going to come out. There we go. And then you can snip that one off, and that is your Anya hat. All we have left to do now is make the pom-pom. I'm going to show you how to make one of these lovely big fluffy pom-poms to go on the top of a hat. In this case, the Anya hat that we're making with Debbie Bliss Merion yarn. Now, from a whole ball of Merion, I've knitted this hat, which is the sort of the standard size for the pattern, and this is how much I've got left. So that's enough to make a really nice big podgy pom-pom. The thing with this yarn that I think is really beautiful is that you can, if you buy 2 balls of this yarn in contrast colours, you make 2 hats with bodacious pom-poms. So you can choose whichever colour you're going to work with to make a pom-pom to match. So I've got some of this lovely green left over, and obviously the gold. I think maybe what we'll do is we'll make a gold pom-pom that would sit very beautifully on the top of that lilac. So let's move those out the way. Now, if you haven't used a pom-pom maker before, this is a pom-pom maker. It looks a bit confusing if you haven't used one before, but basically it's 2 sections together like that. You clip it together, and then there are 2 sides for making the rounds of the pom-pom. So you take these 2 out first, and I'm going to make a gold pom-pom. So first thing we do, bring the yarn over the pom-pom maker like this, and then just start to wrap the yarn around the pom-pom maker, and the idea is to fill it up until it's nice and plump. So I will meet you back here when I've done that. Okay, so I have filled up one half of the pom-pom maker, and it really is, the fatter you fill it here, the better and more plump your pom-pom's going to be. So I filled it up to there, I'm going to snip that off, and then fold this half of the pom-pom maker into the middle. So now I'm going to work on the other side, open up the other side of the pom-pom maker, and we're going to wind the rest of this lovely yarn into there. So I'll see you in a minute. So I filled that one in nice and chunkily, snip it off and put the two sides of the pom-pom maker together like that. Now the next thing you'll need is a piece of yarn to tie the pom-pom together with. So I'm just going to cut a little piece of what's left there. And the next step is to take your scissors and snip all the way around here. So I've got some scissors here, just snipping with the ends, and off we go all the way around through the yarn. And then I'm going to turn around to the other side of the pom-pom maker and do the same thing. There. Next, we take this piece of spare yarn and slide this piece of yarn into the gap between the pom-pom maker just there. So slide it through, and what we're doing with this piece of yarn is tying the pom-pom together in the middle. So this is a very important part. Tie it super tightly and tie it twice so that there's no way that's going to come undone. Oh, there we go. So that's tied. Now the exciting part. So first of all, open the sides of the pom-pom maker. Like that. And then you can take the two sides off the pom-pom. And here we have the finished pom-pom. Now, you might think, oh, Merion, that looks a bit straggly. And it does. And the reason for that is that it needs a good old trim. So put your pom-pom on a piece of paper. If you start doing this not on a piece of paper, you'll get bits everywhere. And then just take your scissors and snip, snip, snip all the way around to even up the pom-pom into a lovely round shape. So there we are. You've snipped it round to make it a nice round pom-pom ball shape. And you see why I think it's always good to do this on a piece of paper so you can get rid of that. Now the final thing you can do with your pom-pom to get it to be really fluffy like this one is just steam it over the kettle. So pop the kettle on and hold it in the steam of the kettle or over a pan of simmering water, and it opens up all the edges of the pom-pom to make it sort of extra fluffy. You don't have to do that, but it's quite fun if you do. So here's our pom-pom, and the next thing we need to do is to attach it to the hat. So now I'm ready to attach the pom-pom to the hat. And what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to thread both of these two pieces of yarn onto my yarn needle and to thread this down through the top of the hat. So that's on my needle there. Put your hand up into the hat, and here's where we cinched in together. I'm just going to pop the needle straight the way through the top of the hat and pull, turning the hat inside out. Pull the yarn through. There it is. So you can see that, doesn't that gold look so lovely with the lavender? Oh, so now what I'm going to do is just to secure this by stitching it through the top of the hat. And you'll need, you know, a good few stitches here just to make sure it's really, really secure so that your pom-pom isn't going to pom-pom off. And obviously I've done this double threaded just for extra security. And once you're happy with however many times you've sewn that through so you think it's really secure, I'm just going to put it into a little knot there. just for extra security. And then just snip that off and turn it round. And there is one of those gorgeous Anya hats with the pom-pom. You see, once you start knitting these hats, you have to have one in every colour. It's completely addictive. I love it. I hope you enjoyed it too. Don't forget, subscribe to the channel for loads more brilliant projects. We've got some fantastic things coming up and loads of fun projects to share with you. Leave me a comment. What colour are you going to knit yours? I'd love to hear. Happy knitting!